September 3rd. I need approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, our first item, consent agenda for the minutes.
Need an approval of that item?
I do, please.
So moved.
Have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Consent agenda for the minutes of August 6th and August 13th work session. All in favor?
Yes?
Yes. Okay. Now we'll go to our public comment time period. And Jan raises her hands right off the bat. Just for anybody who doesn't know, we have a public time for public persons and residents to
Thank you, Colin.
tell us stuff that we don't know. Okay.
Dear Mayor and City Councilors, tonight I ask you to listen to my concerns about a new committee that is being proposed. At first, it was suggested to call this a Blue Ribbon Committee. Then it was changed to a vetting committee. I think its true name should be the Validation Committee, to validate the absence of a real public process looking into updating our city hall/police station situation. Alternative suggestions made during scant public opportunity to comment, or the suggestions made by certain councilors who didn't enthusiastically embrace staff's idea for this project, seemed to be cast aside with little follow-up or even consideration. Now we are told this overly large and expensive building being proposed is needed and reasonable because it's similar to the one being proposed in Manzanita. I would say that just because Manzanita is making a poor decision and many people there are very unhappy about it, doesn't mean we need to make a poor decision as well. Recently, the majority of the Cannon Beach City Council seemed to finally want to hear what more of the citizens of Cannon Beach actually want to say before moving any further toward this project, especially when we have so many other expensive considerations before us in the coming years. I was grateful and relieved that public input was at last going to be sought. But then it was suggested the process thus far must first be proven to have been legitimate, hence the validation committee idea. I'm sorry, but this has not been a very inclusive process in the eyes of many citizens of Cannon Beach. The whole process needs to be opened up. Alternatives need to be explored before any major decisions are made regarding this project. There are citizens who are proud of Cannon Beach, who would like to continue to be so into the future. Let's carry on our unique heritage and keep our community processes inclusive, legitimate, and intact, not only for our sake, but for the sake of those who come after us.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Nadia Gardner. I live at 80285 Woodland Heights in Arch Cape. I know most of you. I just want to talk about two quick things. Well, one very quick, one more long-winded. But I'm a parent of a 3.5-year-old. I love him to death. One of the things that we do all the time is spend time in Cannon Beach's amazing city park. And always a part of what we do is help clean up wherever we are, and we pick up litter on the beach and at the park, and unfortunately the biggest litter at your park are cigarette butts. And so because of your and Seaside City Parks, my son knows what smoking is. Nobody in our family or our friend group smoke. Where he's learned about it has literally been from the cigarette butts in the parks. And so I know that Cannon Beach has been very forward-thinking in banning cigarettes in the parks, but people don't follow the rules. And there's two things that I think that your city could do to help my son not be attracted to these things like are on the ground, and try to get him to not pick them up because they're toxic, of course. But number one, enforce that rule in our city parks. Remind our information officers and our police to, when they go by the park, if they see people smoking, ask them to not be smoking there. And if they smoke, I understand you have new receptacles, thanks to other great community members here. Make sure that they use them so that my kid isn't the one cleaning up after them and learning about that filthy habit, which is luckily going away in our culture generally. And then the second thing you can do is put up better signs. The signs in your park suck. They're like lists like this in tiny font. There used to be actually near the tennis court and the basketball courts a bigger sign about tobacco use. It fell down, and I actually delivered it to the parks people and asked them to put it back up, and it was never seen again. So if you want people to follow that rule, which I ask you to, new signs. I actually went to Bremerton this last week and saw great signs there. But there are great, more modern signs that are larger and that talk about not just smoking cigarettes, but marijuana and vaping and e-cigarettes as well. And so I brought a couple examples of great ones that I thought were really effective that I saw on the internet. So I just encourage you to encourage staff to maybe make those two changes to try to reduce smoking in our kids as they grow up here. Thank you. My other item here, so I live in Arch Cape. I've lived in the Cannon Beach, Arch Cape area for 20 years. I'm a conservationist. I'm an environmental scientist myself. I care about wildlife, but I also know that we rely on wildlife, and also the habitat that they live in is also places that we rely on as well. So I'm here to ask you to request that Oregon Department of Forestry cancel the Norriston Heights timber sale. As the closest town to the proposed clear cut, your voice would really make a big difference. We've asked also the county to make this request as well. Historically, Oregon Department of Forestry has owned two properties on the north coast in Clatsop County. On the coast itself, they owned part of the Ocola Creek Forest Reserve, and there was a very complicated land exchange that some of us survived. But luckily, the Cannon Beach thought, wow, this is really important for wildlife and for drinking water that we protect this. So they did this land exchange, so ODF no longer owns that property. There's no threat of it being clear cut, which would damage both wildlife habitat and people's drinking water. There's one last piece that ODF owns on the north coast in Clatsop County, and that is the Norriston Heights. That's just 1 mile south of Tullabana, so it's right outside your city limits. It's on Highway 101 on the east side of the highway. It's between, like literally right between Arcadia and Hug Point State Recreational Areas. So this is on scenic Highway 101 and two of the most visited parks for your people, both your residents and your visitors. And it's going to be, the clear cut there, it will be visible from the highway, it will be visible from those parks, it will be visible from the beach. There will be a buffer, but you'll be able to see right through that, and especially from the beach and from the water as well. The whole property is actually 250 acres. The 15 most northernmost property is just above Arcadia State Park, and on that is the Arcadia Cedar, which is actually Oregon's, maybe you don't know, Oregon's largest tree. That's a tree that is 17 feet in diameter. That's more than 3 times my height, and 152 feet high. It's a cedar, it's really incredible, and it's surrounded by old growth trees, and it is occupied identified marble murrelet nesting habitat. That's a seabird about the size of a robin that is going to go extinct on the North Coast. Absolutely. By 2060, they give it an 80% chance of extinction if we don't do something quickly. ODF has decided, okay, well, we can't cut the 15 acres around that tree, but there's 77 acres to the south, and if we reclassify that away from being a layered complex stand and say that it's just understory and nobody notices, we can clear cut that and we can make almost $1 million. And so they went through their very cursory public process, which is very difficult for even I to understand, somebody who's been following this for a very long time, and have proposed this. And only 3 groups were able to get comments against that. ECAP was one of them, the Coral Creek Awareness Project, Wild Salmon Center, and other environmental groups, and 2 neighbors. And those 2 neighbors are one of 20 neighbors there that rely on that property actually for their drinking water. Does this sound familiar? Really important wildlife habitat and drinking water. ODF says this cut will not hurt their drinking water in terms of quality and quantity, but there are numerous scientific studies that say that it will. And they say, just trust us. We don't think that that's enough. We think that they should be proving to these 20 drinking water users that it's not going to impact their drinking water quality and quantity. And we also think that they should try to protect this bird that's about to go extinct under their watch. So I have those and a lot of other things to say, but I'll let it be for now. I would love it if you're interested in putting this on an agenda in the future, a work session or an agenda to talk about it further. I'd love to come back and we can bring some of those landowners from Arcadia and some experts on marble murrelet and drinking water if you like. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadia.
Ken?
Hi, I'm Ken Potter. I live at 131 Ross Lane, Cannon Beach. Hello, Mayor Stidel and council members. I am here today as a citizen of Cannon Beach and a representative of Indivisible North Coast, Oregon, because I'm concerned about the climate crisis and ask that our community be part of the climate solution. I invite each of you, mayor, councilors, staff, and the public, to attend a free screening of the National Geographic documentary film, Paris to Pittsburgh. It will be on Sunday, September 22nd at 3 p.m. at the Columbian Theater in Astoria. Open community discussion will follow the film. Paris to Pittsburgh spotlights the cities, states, businesses, and citizens who are taking action. It explores the very real social and economic impacts of climate change from America's heartland to the nation's coastline. The film features voices from local leaders as well as everyday Americans presenting the stories behind climate-related recovery and resilience. Cannon Beach should be part of the climate solution. Let's explore these ideas together and more. Join the worldwide global climate strikes taking place around the world and right here in Clatsop County. Please join us on Friday, September 20th in Seaside at the Big Orange Chair from noon until 1 p.m. for the Global Climate Strike Rally. There's another one. Please join us again on Friday, September 27th in Astoria at Marine Drive at 16th Street from noon to 1 for a second Global Climate Strike Rally. This global movement started with one lone 15-year-old Swedish girl named Greta Thunberg, who walked out of school on a Friday in August 2018, sat in front of the Swedish Parliament building, and held a handmade sign that said, "Striking for Climate." Every Friday, she showed up alone until other students started to join in. In March of this year, an estimated 1.4 million students around the world left school to strike for climate. This youth-led Fridays for Future movement continues their weekly climate strikes. Now these young people are asking us to join them. They need our help. Their future depends on it. Please come out to the rallies come to the film Paris to Pittsburgh and join in the community discussion. It's time we give our attention to the most serious challenge of our time and create climate solutions before we run out of time. In the words of Greta Thunberg, our house is on fire. We should act like it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you all for that. We got some things to think about. We'll go straight to our proclamations. We have 2 proclamations tonight. Our first one is National Hispanic Heritage Month. We have Folk. Would you like to come up and say something?
Good evening. My name is Minerva Molin, and we are here from the Lower Hispanic Council. We are here to say thank you about the proclamation you are doing tonight for us and the community. We really appreciate what you are doing for us. Thank you.
Good. I'm just curious, the Lower Hispanic Council, what region is that?
Well, we are all Clatsop County,
Oh.
so we are in Astoria, Seaside, and here in Cannon Beach. We do some activities with the Hispanic community, and we have different events during the year. But this year, our executive director was gone to another position, so we are short-staffed and we are not doing very much this year, but we are planning to do something next year here also in Cannon Beach about the Hispanic Heritage Celebration.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a proclamation, and we need a appropriate motion.
I move to approve the proclamation for National Hispanic Heritage Month.
I'll second it.
Seconded. All in, should we do a roll call on this one? Or do we do roll calls on these, or I can't remember? A roll call vote? Roll call vote, then, please.
So, Council President Benefiel,
Yes.
Councilor Risley,
Yes.
Councilor Ogilvy,
Yes.
Councilor McCarthy,
Yes.
Mayor Stidle,
Yes. And with that, Brandon has volunteered to read the proclamation for us.
I do one quick question.
Sure.
At the very bottom of this, it says, I, Sam Stidel. Would you like me to insert my name?
You may
Okay.
you may do that.
All right. For the purpose of designating September 15th through October 15th, 2019 as National Hispanic Heritage Month in Cannon Beach, proclamation number 19-07. Whereas the period from September 15th through October 15th is and has been set aside throughout the United States as National Hispanic Heritage Month. And whereas the term Hispanic or Latino refers to a person of Cuban, Mexican, Puerto Rican, South or Central American, or other Spanish culture or origin who can be of any race, any ancestry, or any ethnicity. And whereas the United States has always drawn its strength from the contributions of a diverse people. And whereas National Hispanic Heritage Month is a time to recognize the contributions made and the important presence of Hispanic and Latino Americans to the United States. And whereas Hispanic Americans have played a prominent and important role in our national heritage, and our Hispanic American residents lift up our communities and our economy as entrepreneurs, executives, and small business owners. And whereas a significant segment of the more than 37,000 people living in Clatsop County are Hispanic, and whereas we honor the rich heritage of our Hispanic community, be it resolved that I, Brandon Ogilvy, by virtue of the authority vested in me as City Councilor of the City of Cannon Beach in the state of Oregon, do hereby proclaim the month of September 15th through October 15th as National Hispanic Heritage Month in Cannon Beach, and call upon public officials, educators, and all residents to observe this month with appropriate ceremonies, activities, and programs as they share in this special annual tribute by learning and celebrating the generations of Hispanic and Latino Americans who have positively influenced and enriched our nation and society.
And for the record, let it be known that I, Sam Stidell, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor, agree.
Thank you, Sam.
As it's, okay.
Thank you, ladies.
Okay, our next one is a proclamation for Home Inventory Week. Now, that might sound a little odd, but the proclamation is recognizing National Preparedness Month. And in its text, which you will hear, it, I'll just summarize, essentially asks people to pay attention to being prepared for an emergency, be it the big one in a go bag or your own home inventory for supplies that you might need should we have another 07 storm type thing. So, in that sense, I will ask the council, unless anybody has any other presentation about it. I don't think so. I think if our new emergency manager was here, he'd speak for a good 20 minutes, but we will need appropriate motion for this proclamation.
I move that the council approve proclamation number 19-08 for the purpose of designating September 1 through September 7th, 2019 as Home Inventory Week in the city of Cannon Beach.
A second?
Okay, Colleen?
Counselor Risley?
Yes.
Counselor Ogilvy?
Yes.
Counselor McCarthy?
Yes.
Council President Benfield?
Yes.
Mayor Stidle?
Yes. Okay, with that,
We haven't approved the minutes. I don't think they're on.
did we do that?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, we
On the
did.
consent agenda.
That was a consent agenda.
Yeah. Counselor Ogilvy, motion moved and Council President Benfield seconded the minutes.
Okay,
I totally missed it.
well, vote yes. Sorry.
I have a correction. So,
Let's tackle that at the good of the order,
all right.
okay? And I will read my proclamation, number 1908, for the purpose of designating September 1st to the 7th as Home Inventory Week in the city of Cannon Beach. Whereas each September is recognized as National Preparedness Month, and where Oregonians have witnessed and experienced natural disasters in our own community, and whereas every community member can take active steps to protect their families and neighbors from natural and man-made disasters. Whereas every family and business in Cannon Beach is encouraged to take active steps to be financially secure after a disaster, and whereas every community member is encouraged to make sure they are properly insured against fire, flood, earthquakes, and storm. And whereas every community member is encouraged to create a home inventory and include as part of their disaster preparedness kit, to include as part of their disaster preparedness kit. Be it resolved that I, Sam Stidell, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the city of Cannon Beach in the state of Oregon, do hereby proclaim the week of September 1st through September 7th, 2019 be known as Home Inventory Week in Cannon Beach, and join cities across Oregon to encourage everyone to build a home inventory of their own personal property and speak with an insurance agent to make sure they are financially prepared for a disaster. Okay. I just want to make sure that everybody tries to do something. I think those folks here in Cannon Beach are very aware. I'm sure every one of you has a go bag somewhere close. I know Mary Beth does. I actually have one on my bike, so as you leave, you may look and see what a go bag could look like. It's about that big. So, okay. Move on to our next item. Action item, City Hall Police Station Vetting Ad Hoc Committee Review. Bruce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Over probably the past year, the city's been involved with developing a program and cost estimates for replacement for a city hall. That work has been done by professionals in the field as far as looking at the needs of the client to determine what the building requirements will be, and then the cost estimates have been updated by companies that are constantly updating their files as far as what the construction costs are throughout different parts of Oregon. So we have that information, and my suggestion is because I've seen instances where people will make statements and say that it's too big, it costs too much, without providing any supporting data. So I think that it's a good step for the council, as you get ready to move in and start talking to the public, to get the reassurance that others in the city have reviewed the information and either tell you that we were crazy, or that we were off a little bit, or that we were off a lot, or that we were right, so that you have that, and that you will be able to move with confidence in saying that this is what is required and this is what it would cost. Without that, I think that somebody else can come along and just say it's wrong, and you have nothing really to go ahead and provide you with the backup. So with that, the recommendation is that it's a relatively narrow scope, that the information is reviewed to make sure that the information was handled properly, that it was, the assumptions were valid, those sort of things, and the product will be that it's right or it's not. It does not preclude you from selecting another group to look at options, although we've gone through and every option that the council had asked or agreed to look at has been investigated. But if you want to go through that process, it does not stop you from doing it. This just would validate or not the information on which we will be basing the decisions, and that we will be basing, possibly basing a referral for the financing of the building.
Okay, discussion.
What will the manager's role be in this group, the city manager's role?
I will probably sit in the meetings, answer questions if asked.
Okay, you won't be guiding it.
No, well, I would think that the group would probably select the chair, and they would be guiding it. The activities would be largely driven by the scope as approved by council, which is to look at the data and see if the data is correct, sort of a thing. And then my role, let me see, the first meeting, I think it's appropriate that because the information was developed by SRG, that they present the information and the committee can ask them questions. I would see their roles pretty much being over after that. And then my role would be to answer questions if they come up from the committee.
And you said that it probably wouldn't exceed over $1,200 for them to come.
Correct.
For 4 to 5 hours.
Correct.
Okay. And what are the locations that are going to be considered? Do we have that down yet?
You have, what they would look at is the entire study. So I think there were 9 or 10 locations that were looked at. And so I think it's important, for example, we looked at a 1-story down here in the front, and it was totally vulnerable to a tsunami. And so early on, it was eliminated in the decision process. And there were a series of pros and cons given, and the cons were such that it was like, okay, let's not even consider that. part of this process, I think it's important that they look at that and see and make a determination, was the logic valid? Was it fair in what was presented? For example, in that case, there's the disadvantage is the tsunamis. The advantage is that it was the lower cost item, and I'm not sure what the other one was, if there was another advantage in that case. But to look and make sure that the comparisons were fair. So they would look at all.
So are you saying the Spruce Reserve would be one of those?
No,
or is
because
that out?
that's not one that we looked at.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear about
Yeah,
that.
that was not on the list of the projects that were included in the analysis.
Okay. And then right here, this is the only thing that bothers me really is saying, did the city do a reasonable, responsible, and professional job in collecting and analyzing the information? And it's mentioned twice, and it almost makes me feel that if it's mentioned twice, there's some concern about it. So I just think maybe that's too many times.
I agree, I just didn't catch that I said it twice.
Okay.
You can choose which one to eliminate, and I'll be fine with that.
I didn't write it, but anyway.
No, I know, but I'm saying, but just pick one of the two. The idea is that were we honest brokers in developing the information? And did we use reasonable standards? Did we come up with things that people would say, well, that's not reasonable, that's crazy? You need to hear it, I need to hear it, but mostly you need to hear it so that you have confidence or you can make other decisions.
Do you foresee the city council attending these meetings, or?
They will be public meetings because they will be working for you. And any meeting you want to attend would be fine. But what I see the product being is that they report back to you with a report.
So you don't see one of us being say, a liaison member of the
You could,
committee?
however you want to set it up. I didn't set it up that there was a liaison member, but certainly you can always do that.
Okay.
And I want to make this clear, this is not precluding public input at all.
No, this is just looking at the data, because people will question, and I've heard it questioned already, but without any supporting data to make the statements. So this is like, is our data good or not?
And then we will go out to public
Sure.
hearings and public forums and make sure that we get as much public input as we possibly can.
Absolutely, and I think that there's a process that we need to go through to develop that material, and I think that we should be developing that material while this is happening, because this is a relatively short window before we have a vote. So I think that we should be developing that material, and I think that the step that you're talking about is critical. I've never thought that we should avoid any kind of a public process, but we needed to develop the information so that we knew what we were talking about.
We've talked to some extent about I'll use the validation committee approach. And I guess have concern of getting enough people to really do that vetting or validation. So I'd make a suggestion, and by the time you go out, ask for volunteers, make selection and so forth, I think we've lost time. I'd make a suggestion that we pick each of our standing committees, each designate a member, and it could be the chair of that committee, or one of the members that would really has some particular skills, and have them be part of this validation committee. So we've got 4 or 5 standing committees, and the rest I would draw from these people that keep showing up at the meetings. And rather than going out and asking for volunteers, that'll take another couple of months by the time we go through all that. Where we already know we have people who stepped up and volunteered to work to make this a better city, and they are on our standing committees. Use them, and then there are some really passionate regular attendees, and we know more here than usual today. But pick, like, if there, I didn't count how many committees, but 5 committees, and they pick 5 members from the public, and that is our vetting committee. And we could do that literally this week, rather than go through this process of posting and asking for people that want to come in and do it, teaching them all the rules on public meetings. We already have a core cadre of people that can jump right into this.
Certainly. If I can make one comment, I mean, Jan referred to this as a validation committee. To me, it's not, at least in the beginning. It is somebody that is looking critically at what we did, so to me, it is a vetting committee. The result may be that they validate what we said, or they may refute what we said. So I'm not looking to this committee. I'm not involved with selecting who's going to be on it. And I hope that I answered Robin's questions as far as what my role would be, is trying to influence. So it's to find out if we did the right thing. It is to look critically at what we did. It may validate. It may end up that we just have to go back to the drawing board. But I think the process is important.
I agree. I think vetting is a proper term. I suggested that at the last meeting, rather than a blue ribbon committee, which who knows what that is.
I kind of like Mike's idea for the standing committees. I would want to make sure that from the public end of it, we have some professionals, an architect or an engineer or a builder of some kind, from the community. I wouldn't want to hire anybody, but somebody that we know we have some insight into the options that aren't presented. Because this looks to me like, I think this is where Jan's getting her sensation, it looks like a very singular scope. The scope is going to be very hard to define, because all you're doing is looking at the presentations that are given to you and saying whether they're good or not. Without some sort of expertise there to know what would be a bad presentation or a good presentation, you're going to need an engineer to understand some of that stuff, or a builder, or an architect. So I'm not happy about the whole thing. I think, using what Mike was saying about using our standing committees, at least you have folks on the standing committees that are aware of the process that we've been going through, hopefully. And know the community well enough to know that there's where the properties are and all that kind of stuff. I just have troubles with the fact that if I were on a committee and I was given a slideshow of what SRG has given us and asked basically, is there justification for what they showed me? I went, yeah, obvious. I mean, they showed you an architect's presentation, one architect's presentation. If there were 4 or 5 architectural presentations, that would be a little different. That would be a vetting. I kind of agree with Jen. I think this is a validation. But I'm interested. I just want to make sure that if we go through all this and we spend some time doing it, and the city council says, okay, they validated it, we're back to square one. We don't know what we're doing. That's just where I'm concerned.
Mr. Mayor, if I can respond to that. I totally understand what you're talking about, to look at all other options. This scope was narrowly defined because it comes up with a number. It comes up with a size for the building. And so the question is, did we use the right processes and use the right data to come to that point? If you are looking and saying, should they have looked at other alternatives? To me, that's a different scope. To combine the two completely negates the question whether or not the information to come to the conclusion, or at least the numbers that we did, is valid or not. If you So I would suggest you keep it, you keep it that narrow, or you change the scope, because I don't see the two mixing that well. So if you want to have somebody look at all the alternatives to it,
No, I'm not saying that kind of alternative. The project justification, to me, is kind of obvious, and that makes sense. The facility program of how much a new building would be needed, how many square feet, what kind of HVAC system and all that kind of stuff, that makes sense. The cost estimates are just logical. The one that challenges me is when you start looking at the sites and you have an engineer that says this is the only way to do it, when I know, because I know some little bit about engineering, there are other ways to do it. That's what concerns me.
and also the information that's shown on those site plans is not a design.
I understand that.
It just shows that the block size of what was determined for the building fits on that site. It can be a completely different layout.
Yeah.
So there were no decisions made from the design. That was done purposely.
I understand all that.
Okay.
Up until you get to certain points about how something is built. And that's where I run into a problem. So I guess that's my only, it's a smaller part of the entire program. And it's one that concerns me because it can be dramatic in the costs. So. Anybody else? Okay. Now what do we do?
This doesn't require a vote, correct? Are you looking for direction from us, Bruce?
Correction.
It will require a vote because you're creating a committee. You don't necessarily have to vote tonight.
Well, what kind of vote are you looking for?
Um,
Vote to approve the committee or vote to begin searching for people on the committee?
There's a couple ways to do it. One is if you were to approve the committee, then, and I'm assuming the direction would be to try to find people, and you would give the parameters on that. There was a suggestion made by Mr. Benefield regarding that. Another option would be to continue the direction and take it to the next meeting, possibly to develop a resolution or whatever might be more comfortable for you as far as what the criteria would be, and then possibly to bring names of people that the committees have decided want to put forth. I'm not sure, and because in Mike's recommendation, he referred to people in the audience, so I don't know if we asked them, anybody else to volunteer, how that would go. But again, that's the kind of direction that we would need. The first question is whether or not you think that this is a good process, and if you think it's a necessary or desirable process as part of moving forward to the referral. If it doesn't make sense, if it doesn't meet your needs, then you should reject it.
Okay, let's go with what Bruce just said first and say, do we want to stand up a committee?
I do.
Okay. Robin?
I'd like to have more public input in who that committee would be.
Okay. But a committee? Okay.
Yeah, I'm supportive of having a committee.
And I think what I'm hearing is we need to make a motion to establish a committee so that we can get that started.
Well, I'm asking is just to see if we want to do this in general, and then we can figure out how we want to do it. Or if we don't want to do it, but we've got three already, but or just kind of a consensus to see if we want to do a committee. Then we can start discussing details of how to put it together, like what you just said previously.
Well, ultimately, we want public input.
Yeah.
And this committee, this vetting committee would be a step in assuring the public that this isn't just some harebrained idea of 5 counselors. That the public, of 10 or more members, have vetted this the data and said, you know, we don't see a problem with this. They may make recommendations of something we didn't look at, or they do have a problem with it, but at least it's had a first cut by people that really focused, didn't just come to a meeting, a public meeting, and hear what was said or espouse their own opinion, but they had people that had been several meetings looking at the actual data on which the decision should be made. And to me, that would give me, as a member of the public, sitting in the audience, I'd have a little more confidence that this has wider spread acceptance, at least what SRG is presenting us makes sense, or some part of it doesn't. Then we get the public input. My concern is, after we've had the public meetings, and they all come out with all their opinions, then I can't imagine there's going to be a massive, there might be massive consensus for one particular program, one particular site, which would be nice. I seriously doubt that would happen. If it did happen, I think it'd make our council decision pretty easy. If they're just as diverse as we are, I don't see a decision being made even after all of that's done. If the council can't agree now on a preference, what are we going to hear after all these committees and public hearings that's going to help us make a decision? So that's my concern.
I hear it, and I think I heard a yes out of that. As far as,
I think committees are the way to start.
okay. I think it's a good waste of time, but considering that we've been working on this, wasting time, why not? So, so now how do you want to do it? How, I think Mike has presented an idea that of our 5 committees or 7 committees, or we'll pick
We got budget, review, planning, parks.
at 7, don't we? Committees, standing?
Yeah, it used to be, no, so it's budget, planning, CRB, parks, public works, TAC,
Okay.
farmers market, is a stag committee,
HRAP,
HVAC, well, no, they're not a committee.
they're not committee.
Friends of HVAC, they're not a committee.
They're not,
No, they're not city.
There's what, 7?
So that's,
7,
Eight.
8. Okay, so that gives us 8 members. And we can ask from the committees to appoint somebody from each committee? Or do you want to just ask for volunteers from the committees?
About the same thing.
Well, the committee, if the committee appoints somebody, you know you're getting one person
Yeah.
per committee.
Yeah.
But if we ask from the committee members, you might get all 5 from the design review.
Probably ought to just say one from each.
Okay.
Just to keep it manageable.
And then,
And then what, equal number of ad hoc committee, community members?
we can, but we're going to have to figure out how to approach this. Do we want to have an open request for committee members? Or do we want to,
Well, we could do it like we do vacancies on our standing committees. Post it, submit an application, and the council chooses.
How long would that take?
It'd be 1 month.
Bruce?
My recollection is correct. There was discussion about offering tours during the public hearings for Four Dunes and to try to do recruitment for this committee as part of that process. So I'll kind of jump ahead for when we were going to be in, go to the order of what staff was going to recommend is that rather than try to advertise and say come early, is that just say that after the meeting, anybody that's interested will do a tour of City Hall. And in making that announcement, possibly the mayor or someone could say that we're looking for 3 committee members, 8 committee members, or whatever to, take a look at this review. We can put the scope on the web and say, you can check it and please get us your information by such and such a date. That was something you've already talked about, so that's why I brought it up.
And that'd be done within the next 2 weeks. So that would fit to work with the,
Just to make sure we're on the same schedule, that would be the September public hearings. There's also one October 7th. So are we saying that we do it for the first 5?
Yeah,
That would-
let's do
I
it.
think that you're going to get
yeah, I
a
think we
crowd.
should do it before the first
Yeah.
5.
So so the
After
first 5, and
yeah.
then we ask people to apply before the October regular meeting.
Okay.
And then we ask, because we're starting early, each committee is going to meet this month before we get to the October meeting. And so we ask each committee to forward a name for that time. Okay.
Do we want an even number or an odd number on the
Odd.
committee?
You have to have
Okay,
a,
so we may end up with, at least one less person from the public than we have committee members.
Whatever number you select.
I mean, keep in mind, the standing committees, that's also our public.
Right.
Right.
So it's not like you're getting 8 staff people and public. You could make that a smaller group.
And if I can anticipate a question, is it possible for more than one person from the committee to be on this committee? Because there may be 2 people that have an interest. Can the other one be somebody that would be counted as, a member of the public? I just believe that question may get answered. I'd like to know what your answer
oh,
is.
you mean if somebody from a standing committee?
Suppose there's 2 people from Parks have an interest, and they appoint Ashley, and Mike wants to do it also. Can Mike apply separately?
As a public.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't see any problem
I
with
don't
that.
see why not.
Yeah, I don't think you can really avoid that.
No, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
So the answer is yes, you can apply separately.
And I really like Sam's suggestion that we highly encourage someone from professions that would have knowledge about this.
Yeah.
We asked, but didn't come to any consensus. Is there someone on the council that wants to participate in the committee? Do you have a wish that one of us do so?
I have an opinion.
That's
Let me
fine.
Let me just have an opinion. I don't think that would be a good idea, just because I think as the 5 of us would be the ones looking at the material that they come back with. I don't know if that would be, being a liaison on the committee has a voting problem in that sense. And so we gotta, I think I would just be careful of that.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Because I think all of us would like also to be on that.
We can
So,
attend the meetings just as an audience
Yeah,
member.
you can attend and listen.
So do we have a number?
I was thinking, just to make it comfortable here, if you had 11,
Yeah.
7 and 4.
How many standing committees do we have? Well, I only got 7, when I was writing them down. Okay.
Yeah.
Too many fingers before. I used to count E-Prep, and that was like number 8, because we used to have 8. So
It's
we only have 7. Budget, Parks, Public Works, DRB Planning, Farmers Market, Tourism and Arts. That's all I got. Okay. So that's 7.
Right. That's kind of what I was thinking. And they can't opt out. Somebody has to send at least one of them. Ha. Fix them. That sound good? Okay, now,
So to get to the 11, we'll let folks know that you will be making appointment of 4 public members beyond what is recommended by each board.
Good.
So that's the number of openings essentially.
and I think let's put it on just a minute, Barb, on the council to reach out to other folks. We don't, if you've got a professional that you know, let them know that there's an open seat and put your name in. So, Barb?
I just wanted to know if it counted as, you know, if you're on two committees, you can't be on another committee. Is this a professional committee, so it doesn't count? Or
Ashley,
in terms of the two,
Can I see the exact wording of that restriction?
Just checking.
oh, see what you're saying.
that rule was written specifically for you, Barb.
I've always thought Bart would be.
I know what page
I
number.
remember that's in the charter or the.
I had you on that.
I think it's in the charter.
It's, yeah. Oh, it's miscellaneous. Okay, no member, it says no member of a city's standing committee, commission, board, or similar body shall serve more than 8 consecutive years on such body or serve on more than 2 such bodies simultaneously unless the council first states on the record detailed reasons why such service is in the vital interest of the city. So it says standing committee, and so my interpretation of ad hoc would not count as a standing committee.
There we go.
Good, yeah.
Okay, and then when we,
Keep Barb off now.
now's your chance. So we'll do our presentations during the dune management thing, and when we get some names together, then we'll vote on the committee creating it.
Yeah, well, and if it's all right with council, we'll also try some other venues to try to let people know that this opportunity exists rather than just limit it to people that came to the Fort Dune presentations.
Right.
You're going to the membership meeting tomorrow, talking about the state of the city at the library. There you go. There's
Yes,
an
I am.
opportunity.
This is going to come up.
Yes.
Barb, will you be there?
I'll think about it.
Okay, I got another question. Hang on. Les?
Yeah, what about E-Prep? That's still a standing committee for functioning?
You're not functioning. Who,
They can't meet, they only have 2 people. They haven't met since March of 2017. So we haven't, I didn't count them in as.
Right.
committee.
that's a challenge because the committee could the 2 people in the committee pick somebody? And that wouldn't really be a vote, but it's awkward because they don't have a quorum, Les. You need to find somebody to be on.
You still got a committee that you formed.
Yeah.
In charge.
But you can put your name in as one of the residents. So have both of your committee members sign up.
You're somebody else who's on my list, Les.
So I would please do it that way. And that way we don't have to wrangle around some possible legal problem. Colleen?
I just had something to clarify. If you're going to, you want to vote on these people October 1st, so they should be in your packet so that you can review all the names. I would need all of the names by the 23rd, it's the Monday, so I can put the packet out on the Tuesday, because then we're all going to that big board in cities thing. So that doesn't give you a very long turnaround from the last tour, but if that was plenty of time, you think they're either going to want it or not, then, but the 23rd would really be the drop dead time to accept applications if you want them in the packet, to give you a week to review them.
Let me just ask a question. Jeff, is it 4th Thursday you have a meeting? And who is that? And what date is that? Does anybody have a calendar? So planning, and do we know what the 4th Thursday is?
26th,
Um,
and Jeff will be here that day. Would you be at the board in cities?
well,
Or,
Yeah. yeah, but I would suggest then that you allow us to keep things open until the 27th, so they have the opportunity to make a selection. We're going to be out of town anyway, so I don't know how much time. If we have anybody earlier, we can make sure that you get those applications. But I'll at least allow to the 27th, planning to make an appointment, and you'll still have, Friday and over the weekend.
If we don't have enough names by then, we could always bump it to the work session.
And make it a combined.
Make it a combined thing if we had to. Does that make,
Can we appoint anybody at a work session?
not technically, but we can have a special meeting at that
That was my
time.
point,
Yeah,
yeah.
You do need a vote.
Okay,
and that would just be for Colleen's being able to get the word out
okay.
properly. Okay? Okay? Okay, now we can move on to our next topic.
Let me ask one question. Is the scope approved, or do you want to modify the scope? You know what, I'm sorry. I think we should finalize the scope so that people know what they're getting into, and we're not changing it, after they've applied. So my recommendation would be that we do it. However, there is going to be another meeting where we talk about forming the committee, making appointments. It would be possible to finalize the scope at that time. It's just a little awkward if somebody reviewed it and then there's a change. But it's not the end of the world.
Well, we could approve it now and amend it at that time.
Sorry about that.
Nancy did not like that idea. No amending.
Glad you, yeah, sorry.
Oh, see that you do better next time. So you're saying approve it now and then amend it if we want to?
We can always do that. There's,
You can give a tentative approval so that this is what we're sending out. If you feel a need to amend it, you can amend it, and hopefully everybody will be okay with the amendment. I think that if we're looking at substantive change, like coming up with new alternatives, that kind of thing, that's a substantive change, so I think that we need to decide on that before we move forward.
well, why don't we give it by consensus, a tentative approval of the scope as presented, and then we can amend it and make it formal at the time we select all the committee members.
And then we can, it'll be a resolution, correct?
Resolution.
Be a resolution, we can make this an attachment to the resolution. Okay, good. Thank you.
That's it? Okay. We will move on then to our utility rate presentation, the show and tell portion of our tonight. We'll take a few minutes so that they can set things up.
Yeah. Yeah. Gives me a chance to move to the back of the room. Using a lot of their own creativity to come up with models that may be more fair than the way we currently charge our users for utilities. And so, if you recall, there was a presentation done, and there were 4 models that had been examined, and we said that we would look for some more. And so the committee, and in particular, Carolyn's been working very hard to develop a 5th alternative. And so we wanted to introduce that tonight, as well as a review of the other 4, with the intent and hope that we are working towards a decision from the council that would say that, we just love our current system so much we don't want to touch it, or this one looks like it's more fair, to give Carolyn and the committee and staff some direction on where we're headed as far as the way we calculate rates. This doesn't have anything to do with how much the rates are yet, but it's how, the fairness in the model, which she uses comparisons that we're allowed to see. Carolyn Frost.
All right,
We have a couple other members of the committee here. We've got Les Weirson and Janae, I can't pronounce the whole last name. The last time we talked in committee in detail on this was in February before we brought the last version to you. And the intent on this was to bring the 5th version after we had looked at some of the results from scenarios 1 through 4, as well as try to give you some quantitative examples of the way the rates work now, so you have some framework and understanding of how things are working now, and hopefully some tools to help you make an informed decision in terms of what you want to do going forward. So just a little bit of background, which might be repetitive, and just to know how long we've been working on this. We started back in February of 2018. That is not a typo. That was when the Public Works Committee came to council, and just kind of, that's when we had the informal meeting between council and the committee in terms of what we were doing. And at that point, the committee was tasked to go and look at the current utility rate structure and bring back findings to council. And since that time, in about the fall of 2018, after the committee spent some time discussing the current structure and possibilities for other structures, a rate consultant, which is FCS Group, was hired to implement the structures that were proposed by the Public Works Committee. And so that was in the fall of 2018. And at that time, there were 4 different scenarios that were presented and that were implemented, and we brought those back to council in February of 2019. And we said at that point that we would come back again to, kind of as a demo and kind of show you the work that we've done since then. And since that meeting in February of 2019, continued to look at the 4 rate scenarios, not so much in our Public Works Committee meeting, because we kind of felt that we were kind of spinning our wheels at that point, because there are a lot of different options, and without getting some direction, we didn't feel like that we were really making any progress. But looking at them a little bit more, each of the scenarios really did fail to address some of the issues or the key concerns that we saw with the 4 scenarios presented. So at that point, we did there was a survey of 30 Oregon cities done, and just for reference, the backups have the list of all the cities that we looked at. And that was done sort of to identify the common practices that cities use in terms of their billing practices, and compare that to our current rate structure to kind of see if there were big differences in the way that we were handling the rates here versus in some of those other communities. And so based on that, there was one more scenario that was generated, scenario 5, and that was informed by the analysis of the first 4 scenarios as well as the survey that we did. And that particular scenario, as with the other ones, was implemented by FCS Group and was analyzed. And that brings us to where we are today. This next slide is a duplicate of what was in the last presentation, just to give you an idea of the customer base. We have only 2 billed customer classes, residential and commercial. And the commercial class includes not just commercial, it also includes mixed-use properties. That is a property that has a commercial component as well as a residential component, whether it be an apartment or a condo or whatever the case may be. So it's also mixed use. We have a total of approximately 1,780 customers. 89% of them are residential customers and 9% are commercial customers. And there are 2% of the customers that are non-billed accounts, and those are the city counts and the fire department accounts. So those are all non-billed. In terms of the revenue and usage, and this is what prompted the look at our rates to start with, is that you see that when you look at the usage in the second column there, the usage is pretty well split evenly between commercial and residential, but the revenue is not split evenly. There's a much larger percentage is borne by the residential customers as opposed to the commercial customers. But on the flip side of that, if you look at the number of customers that are residential and number that are commercial, there's a lot more connections that are residential connections. So there's kind of 2 factors playing here. It's where the water is getting used and how many connections there are, and therefore how big your system has to be in order to support this big residential customer base. And just as a note, the data that we've been analyzing for all of the scenarios, 1 through 4 as well as 5, spans October 2017 to September 2018, just so you have a feel of where the time frame is. And, you know, when we presented, or when I presented last time, I think I overwhelmed you all with numbers, because there was a lot of numbers. So in this one, we're trying to give you some attributes that would be beneficial in a rate structure that we have, you know, a way to look at the different scenarios and make some sort of decision. So what we're looking for is a rate structure that has equity. Basically, it aligns revenue with the customer makeup, considering the fact that you have both the usage component as well as how many customers you have in each class. And so an equitable distribution of costs. We wanted a structure that is definitive, that is, you could clearly define how you were going to categorize a customer. What we have now, some of it is a little, I'll call it squishy, but something that is very definitive, that you could say if A then B without having, you know, if then and all that. Sorry, I'm talking math, that's kind of what I do. Conservation, we wanted a structure that promotes conservation. You know, we want to, I don't want to say reward, but we want to acknowledge the fact that people that are using less water are being recognized for that in the way that they are being billed. We wanted something that was simple. In other words, a structure that's easy to implement and maintain, a structure that ensures the record keeping and billing accuracy, and a structure that's compatible with our current record keeping and billing software. We don't want something that's going to have to reinvent the wheel in terms of the way we do billing. And then the one that we added here is we wanted to not necessarily replicate what they're doing in other Oregon cities, but we wanted to have that inform the work that we were doing, and that we're not kind of off the reservation and doing something really weird. I know our town likes to be unique, but this maybe is not the best place to be unique. And just as a final note on this page, the analysis was performed on the water files, but we would recommend that the same billing be done for wastewater. We haven't looked at that point, but it would be the same approach, which is what happens now. Is you have the same billing approach for wastewater as you do for water. So the current billing practices, just the basics. For any single-family resident, they are billed as a 3/4 meter, regardless of the meter size. So even if you're a residential property, single-family, and you have a 1-inch meter, you're only billed for a 3/4 meter and not for a 1-inch meter. A multifamily residential property is billed at the price of a 3/4 meter times the number of dwellings that you have. So if you have an apartment building that has 10 units, your rate is what a single family unit would be billed at times 10. And this is one of the things when we looked at the survey of the Oregon cities, we did not find another city that approached the billing in this way. Either a multifamily property is billed based on the meter size, and that's the case probably in about 2/3 of the properties. 2/3 of the cities. The other option is the first dwelling unit is treated as one, and then the second dwelling unit is actually charged at a less rate. So you're kind of recognizing the fact that you don't have 10 3/4-inch meters. You have one maybe larger meter, but you're treating the other units in the multifamily as less than a full unit. And that's done in about, let me get the number. It's in the backup slide. That's done in about 13% of the cities that we surveyed. And about 77% bill based on meter size. So that's kind of the way the meters in our town are billed. And then the bill is actually based on 2 components. The first component is the base rate, and that's based on either your meter size or your number of dwellings if you're a multifamily. And the rate increases with meter size. So if you have a 3/4-inch meter, we're paying $24.20, and if you have a 1-inch meter, you pay 2.5 times that as your base rate. But what our billing does that is unique, again, something that I didn't see in any of the cities in the survey, is that as your meter size increases, your allowance of water increases. Instead of getting 400 cubic feet, if you have a 1-inch meter, you're getting 1,000 cubic feet. So you're not getting what most communities call a ready-to-serve fee. That's just a fee that you're paying to be hooked to the system. It's kind of like when you pay your phone bill, there's a line charge, or you pay your electric bill, there's a line charge. But the fact that our allowance increases as the meter size increases, you're really just paying, I guess you're being required to buy a certain amount of water, and you're paying a certain amount for that water, but it's not really a ready-to-serve fee. And I think when I get to the next page with an example on that one, that might be a little clearer. I don't think I explained that too well. And then our last component is after you've passed your allowance amount, whether it be 400 cubic feet, 1,000 cubic feet, you pay the same rate per 100 cubic feet. So those are kind of the basics of the way our system works. I'm going to pause there. Was anything there not clear, or does it need more explanation? I guess that's a no. So I just wanted to show you implications of some of these billing practices that we have here in Cannon Beach. The first one is the impact of allocation increasing with meter size. And this does lead to a billing disparity between customer types. So our current rates are $24.20 is the base rate, or the ready-to-serve rate, and $6.05 is what we're paying per 100 cubic feet over your allowance. Now, all customers who are actually using over their allowance, they're basically paying $6.05 for every drop of water from the beginning to the end. So they're always paying $6.05. However, an example for a customer who uses a 3/4 inch meter, if they're using less than their allowance, say they use 200 or 300 cubic feet, you can see that what they end up paying, it's kind of down under the example there. Somebody who's using only 200 cubic feet, they're essentially paying $12.10 per cubic feet. And somebody who's using 300 cubic feet is paying $8.07. Basically what we're getting here is these people that are down here on this end that are using very little water, they end up paying a premium for their water because that ready-to-serve fee that we are charging is not truly a ready-to-serve fee because the usage is the usage allowance is increasing as the meter size is increasing. And a true ready-to-serve fee would be everybody would pay X amount just to be connected to the system, and that X amount would be based on the size of their meter. And then on top of that, you would pay for your usage. Did that make sense? And an impact on the multi-unit and mixed-use billing, just a kind of an example here. Multi-unit residential, I think we talked about this on a couple slides ago, they're billed as a 3/4 inch meter rate times the number of dwellings, regardless of the meter size. So they could have a 2-inch meter, a 6-inch meter, but they're charged based on the number of dwellings. However, a multi-unit commercial property is billed based on the meter size, regardless of the number of businesses they have. So, you know, one of the businesses downtown or the little areas that could have 7 or 5 shops within one square, they'd have 1 meter, but they have 7, they have 7 business customers, but they're not charged based on the number of businesses are there, they're charged based on the meter size. So this is kind of where you get a difference in the way that a business is handled and a residential property is handled. And then when you get a mixed-use property, commercial and residential, they totally go by the commercial rules. So even though a property might have 3 businesses and 6 apartments, they are not subject to the times the number of dwellings. They're charged basically totally on the meter size and not on the number of either businesses or residences that are in that property. And just to give you an example of where this leads to some disparity for a these 4 examples here are actual examples out of the data file. So a multifamily, residential customer who uses 18,600 cubic feet for the year, they paid $3,775. And then if you go down to the commercial customer, you can see that they paid about the same amount within $200, but in terms of their usage, they use like 3 times the amount of water, but they're paying the same price over the year that residential customer paid, even though the residential customer, used 1/3 of the water. And you can see, so And on each of those, I put down there what the cost per 100 cubic feet is, and that's a typo on the one that says 611 per cubic foot. That one actually should say per 100 cubic foot. Sorry. So this was just to kind of give you an example of the disparity in terms of the billing that goes to different customers based on the amount of water and the meter size that they're using. So depending on how they're classified, somebody can pay a whole lot more or less for using the same amount of water and having the same meter size. And the last one here is kind of an example on the single-family residential building for those customers, oh, thank you, for those customers that have a 1-inch meter, residential customers, but they're only being charged for a 3/4 inch meter. So in this example here, you can see a residential customer and a commercial customer who are using essentially the same amount of water. And in this case, the commercial customer is actually paying more than the residential customer. And again, that's because the residential customer is not being charged for a 1-inch meter. Again, those are just some of the uniquenesses of our billing scenario. And just to go over the different scenarios, I didn't want to revisit all of scenarios 1 through 4. You heard them all in February. Hopefully they're somewhere still in your brain and you kind of remember something about those. And I didn't want to go through all those numbers again. Just as a refresher, the first scenario had to do with, the first scenario 1 and 3 had to do with multi-unit residential customers. And in those two cases kind of went along what we saw with the Oregon City survey, moving them all to meter size or moving them to where the second, third, fourth, fifth unit in a multi-unit family were being treated as less than a full share. And those are the two standard practices that you see in the survey. And scenario 2 and 4, well, scenario 2 was one where you would charge different rates for commercial versus residential. That is something that does happen in some communities. Some communities charge residential customers more, some charge commercial customers more. So that was one of the scenarios that the Public Works Committee felt was important to look at. And then the scenario 4 was kind of altering the base rate and the usage rate independently to see how that affects the revenue sources. But looking at those 4 scenarios, at least to me, none of them were very satisfying. None of them really addressed some of the disparities that we talked about on the previous 3 pages. And because of that, we asked FCS to do scenario number 5. And there were 2 main changes in scenario 5 from what we have now. Number 1 would be all customers would be on meter size. And that addresses the fact that we have some mixed-use properties that kind of don't fit the mold that we have right now. We also have properties in town that by ownership are condos, but they really operate as hotels. So I mean, they're kind of residential, but they're really commercial properties. And we do have quite a bit of that in our community. And trying to track that would make a very complex system, you know, if we went just to meter size for everybody, you kind of have, all right, this is the only thing that we have to worry about. What meter size does that customer have? How much water are they using? It's simple, straightforward, and you don't have to keep track of a lot of minutia in order to figure out how to do the billing. So on scenario 5, all customers on accounts, they're based on the meter. And the second thing is what I talked about in one of the examples is the disparity that we get by changing the allowance of water as the meter size goes up. We didn't see that in any of the other cities. Basically, if a 3/4 inch meter gets 400 cubic feet, somebody with a 3-inch meter would get the same amount, because then you have a true ready-to-serve fee that's based on the meter size, and then you have a true usage fee that's based on any usage you have above an allowance. Now again, when we looked at the Oregon cities, probably about 60% don't give any allowance when, for water. You know, it's like you pay from the first drop that flows, but about maybe 25% actually give some sort of allowance, and it's the same allowance no matter what meter size you have. And then there was a couple communities that gave the residential customers a larger allowance than the commercial customers. So that was what we kind of did for scenario 5, and I think that's the only set of numbers. I tried to make it consistent with what we did with scenarios 1 through 4, which were in your presentation from February. And in this particular example, the base rates are determined by meter only. Everyone is given an allowance of 400 cubic feet. And then what we did, as with the other ones, we were trying to do a revenue neutral approach. We looked at what the current billing or the current scenario created in terms of revenue, and that was 1.212 million. And so we adjusted the base rate and the usage rate until we got a revenue from this new scenario that matched the old one. And in this particular case, for this scenario, we actually had to decrease both the base rate and the usage rate by 11.25%, and you ended up with the same revenue. And the reason that you did that is all of the customers right now that are not paying a base rate because, all right, they might have a 3-inch meter, but they end up not paying any base rate because they're using all of the water that they're allocated at, I don't know, 6,400 cubic feet instead of getting 400 cubic feet. So basically they end up paying for all of that water between the 400 and whatever their current allowance is. And that's how that number kind of comes out. It's not magic, you know, it's not like everyone would end up paying less in this situation to get the same revenue. It's just it shifts the burden of the payment. And you can see the percentages here where the current scenario is 41% of the revenue comes from commercial. If we shift to this scenario, 44% would come from commercial. Again, it's not a 50-50 split. It probably shouldn't be a 50-50 split because there are so many more residential connections than there are commercial connections, even though the commercial customers are using about half the water. But it was, so, okay, I'm seeing some days over here. Am I losing you all? No?
How did you decide on
The 400 is what we use now. The model that we were provided would allow us to alter that number, so it could be something else. It could be 300. It could go to 0. So this was just one particular example, as I did with scenarios 1 through 4, just giving you 1 or 2 examples. But the model that SCS provided allows us to make some adjustments in several of these parameters. And I didn't want to overwhelm you with too much on this particular presentation. I was hoping that by looking at the 5 different approaches that we could narrow it down to maybe one of these scenarios, and then we could provide you more information on the scenario that has the most promise, as opposed to trying to overwhelm you with a lot of that now. But that's where the 400 came from. Any other questions on that one? All right. So again, goal here was try to make this easier, not harder, by adding another scenario. So we created this matrix that along the left side we have the different scenarios, and there's a brief explanation of each of them, and across the top are the 5 attributes that we had on like page 2 or 3. You know, we were looking for something that had equity in terms of the customer types, something that had some definitive criteria. And then the other columns are water conservation. Again, we want something that really recognizes that those that are being frugal or being conscious of their water use are recognized in the way that the water is billed. We wanted something that was simple, you know, something that could be implemented into the billing software without a lot of changes from what's in there now. Something that would be easy for staff to continue and move forward and keep it relevant and up to date. And then something that aligns with the survey results. In other words, they thought, okay, is this where we want to do something totally unique and do something that only Cannon Beach does? Or is this something that we should be looking at? What are the common practices in terms of billing, and should we be considering that in terms of the way we do our billing? So that's kind of where the attribute matrix came in, and there's kind of an X in the areas where things intersect. There's some definite benefits to scenario 1 for everyone going to meter size, but scenario 5 kind of hit a lot of the targets in terms of what we were looking for. So now that you've had time to absorb all that information, sorry, I was being facetious there. What we're really looking for at this point is there's 5 scenarios in front of you. Hopefully you remember the ones from last time around, or at least what they provided. And at this point, we would really like to be able to narrow it down to hopefully, like the current scenario and one of the other ones, for us to provide you more information to see if this is something that you really want to move forward with. So I'm gonna pause right there, and I'm gonna ask: is there enough information that you have in front of you between this meeting and the last one to make some sort of not a final decision, obviously, but to provide some direction to the Public Works Committee in terms of where we go from here?
I can start. I was going to try and come up with a pun, but I couldn't get there. Something like, you washed us with all the information. I would go with number 5 right now.
Okay.
I know you can tweak the numbers on that, the base rate and the current, or the usage rates. So that gives you something to play with as far as earnings and stuff like that. But the chart was just obvious, and I think water conservation was one thing that I really wanted to try and solve and make it seem like the consumer has an active part in playing with conservation. So that's where I'd go right now.
Anyone else?
Carolyn,
Yes, sir.
how does scenario number 5 work if we need to try to build in some cash reserves into the system?
And the spreadsheet that we have from SDS, the tool that we have in order to figure out what the base rate and the usage rate would be, allows us to modify those, and we figure out and it will tell us what the expected revenue would be from that scenario. The other part of this that you'll hear from the staff side is that if they want to be able to build in some revenue for whether it be one of the capital improvement projects, or if they want to build in some sort of cushion in there in order to have some reserve, that can be factored into this by saying, okay, we don't need, let me go back a page or two, instead of needing a revenue of 1.212 million, if staff decides based on the projects and the cushion they want to build in is like 1.4 million, we could rerun this tool with a different base rate and usage rate and determine what those rates would be to meet that revenue target. And that would kind of be the next step on this. Theoretically, when we bring the information back to you with more details for the scenario that you want us to look at, we could provide numbers based on those targets that staff would come up with, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Is that where you were going on that question?
That's exactly where I was going with it. I'm still, I don't see why we need to, and I'm not sure if this is the correct term, but somehow it seems that we're giving the commercial customers more water
Yes.
for less return.
Yes. And I think that is a fair statement. And when we did scenarios 1 through 4, looking at what we were getting out, it wasn't accomplishing some solution to what you just stated there, because we were kind of tweaking a few little things here, but it wasn't addressing the fact that, to me, the big fact is that as the meter size goes up, you're given more water. And so, yes, you are paying for that water, but basically you end up not paying that ready-to-serve fee that the people that have the smaller meters and aren't using much, they're kind of footing the bill on that. And that's why I think we get the disparity in terms of the percentage of how much revenue is coming from commercial and residential.
So with scenario 5, you get, ultimately, the residential customer is paying 56% of the total,
Right.
and the commercial pays 44.
Right.
So are you saying that the 3% increase is the best we can do?
In this particular, well, let's see, you could alter other parameters. What I wanted to do is try to stay pretty close to the way things are handled now, that in terms of the base rate that goes up, starting at a 3/4 inch meter up to 6, it goes up at a factor that is related to the diameter, or the diameter of the pipe or the meter that they have. I mean, that scale could change, and that would weight more towards the customers who have the larger meter sizes, which are some of the larger users. I mean, when you look at the data in terms of the usage of the water, the big users are the bigger restaurants and the big hotels. And most of them have, meters anywhere from 1 inch up to 6 inches. If you were to change that scale to put a larger burden on even a larger burden on the commercial customers, you might end up impacting some of the residential multifamily customers who might be some of the bigger, like for example, the Tollivan Inn is actually a condo, even though it operates as a hotel. So right now it's treated as a multifamily property and not as a commercial property. That's one of the other things that I see as kind of weirdness in our system, is that we do have those customers that don't really fit into one of the buckets that we define. But yeah, there are other things that we could alter. But again, I'm not sure, that's the other thing I was uncomfortable with on scenarios 1 through 4, is that you can make the percentages shift by changing some of these numbers. But what is the right target? Should it be a 50-50 split? Should it be a 44-40,
I don't pretend to understand what that exact percentage would be. I just would like to see something a little better than a 3% increase on the commercial customer.
And that could definitely happen, and that was something that we could bring back if if the decision, or if the consensus of council is that we should look just at scenario 5, more in depth. We can bring in a couple of different examples that, maybe vary what that percentage is in that column.
Okay.
And that's straightforward to do with the tool as it was provided.
Great.
Okay.
Carolyn, I guess, and this is just off the cuff here, are we using our water, okay, so it's looking here like we're charging everybody for water, but what's our capacity, and how can we keep providing all this water if we have to switch it over from spring to, see what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Based on what our water rights are, and Karen can confirm this, is that we don't draw all of the water that we are allowed to draw from the creek based on our water rights. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that we should be drawing all that water.
It almost seems like that's not part of this.
Well, it's an interesting point, because when we talked the first time, we did talk about some steps for conservation. Maybe do a tiered structure. When you're using more water, you end up paying more, which of course is something that can of course happen if that's something that we want to look at. But the fact that the folks that are using the most water now really are getting it at the least cost, from the people that aren't using much. By shifting the paradigm here, where we do put the burden on those that are using more water, the hope would be that they would look to conserve and not use as much water. And from that perspective, back to Brandon's question, perhaps when we look at what the base rate and the usage rate is, we would bump the usage rate up some and take the base rate down some, and that way the people that are using more water are going to be paying more because that usage rate is higher. And that's kind of, one of the levers that you have on this tool. And that would definitely shift that percentage division between commercial and residential. But no, that's a very good point, because, it's like,
We only have so much.
we only have so much water, and, it's important to leave enough water in the system for the environment to thrive. And, there are a lot of people in this community that are very conscious of that and are conservation minded, but then there are, candidly, I think when somebody comes on a vacation and they go to a hotel, they're not really thinking about, oh, well, I'm going to take a 2-minute shower. They're like, oh, I'm going to luxuriate in this great shower. And, how do you deal with that? Yeah. I know there are some conservation aspects from the hotels in town. I think most of them do the thing about use your towel more than once and those type of things that you typically see at hotels, but I'm not sure how much control we have over that behavior that the hotel or their customers. Yeah.
Carolyn, the base rate is the same for commercial as well as residential, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And the base rate is based on the meter size?
Yes.
Okay.
So for a 3/4 inch, it's $24.20. If somebody has a 6-inch meter, which is the largest one we have, their base rate is $1,210. So it goes up as a function of the diameter of their meter/pipe.
And in the scenario 5, the base rate is the same no matter what your meter size?
No, it's the same thing. It would be $24.20 would be your base rate for a 3/4 inch meter. And if you had a 6-inch, let's say 3-inch meter, because we only have a couple 6-inch meters in town. If you have a 3-inch meter, your base rate is about right around $400. But right now, with that $400, you get 6,400 cubic feet of water. With scenario 5, you would only get 400 cubic feet of water, so you'd be paying for an extra 6,000 cubic feet of water. And that's where that shift in percentage comes from, is those customers paying for that water that now they're getting, I'm not saying for free, but that they're getting as part of their base rate. So is that a consensus that we should move forward with giving you some additional details on scenario 5?
I think scenario 5 meets a lot of our objections we had before. I think we still do a lot of tweaking with this.
Yes, sir.
I'm thinking about, I know that 400 cubic meters is probably, if it was 0 or twice that, it's not going to change a whole lot. The revenue side. I keep looking at commercial versus residential. When I run my lot of water, pay for all of it. When the restaurant runs it, they're getting a profit, they're getting a return on that. They're making money on our water, and yet they pay a lower percentage. So I think there's more than just the connection
Right.
cost. Yeah, I know running larger diameters, you don't have as many meters to service and all that stuff.
Right.
But there is a different use for that water. It is a resource on which to make a return. When I use it, I'm not making any
Right.
return, it's pure consumption. So I think that's an area that can be tweaked and still be equitable and get closer to that 50/50.
And that was, when we did scenario 2, we kind of had defined a business class. What we called it at that point was a business class and a residential class, and charged them different amounts. The sticking point that we had in the Public Works Committee when we started talking about that was, well, what do you consider, the business class? Because there was the discussions, well, all the short-term rentals should go in there. All the multifamily residential properties that are actually operating as hotels, should all go in there. So Is that, I'd like to, that could end up being complicated, you know, in terms of how you record keep all of that. I'd like to look to see if scenario 5 with altering that usage rate would address the concerns that you're talking, Mike, as well as Brandon had in terms of the percentages there, to see if that shifts that percentage.
I think narrowing it down to this scenario 5 and running your model with different assumptions is the way to go.
Okay. Nancy?
I think also scenario 5 would essentially eliminate the difference between commercial and residential.
Yes.
You just have a consumer.
Yes, you have a
And that's it.
consumer.
Cool.
And that consumer could be a resident, it could be a commercial, it could be a commercial property with three
Whatever.
businesses, 2 apartments above. You know, it kind of takes away all of those things that I call squishy in what we have now, and is a definitive, here's your meter size, here's how much you use, and that is the only 2 things that go into computing what your bill would be.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so if there is consensus on that one, so what we would like to do, we talked about generating these additional detailed scenarios and and kind of look at the main groups that are going to be impacted. If you look at it, all the residential commercial customers with 3/4 inch meters, they're going to have minimum impact because there's nothing changing for them. And that's like 1,560 of our customers, so 15, all but about 300 customers. And then the residential customers on a 1-inch meter, they would be impacted. Commercial customers that have the larger meters, and that's like 75 customers, they would all be impacted. And the multi-unit residential customers, they would have an impact. Some of those would end up seeing an increase in their bill and some a decrease. So we want to make sure that we bring that information back to you so you understand the impact to the different customer groups. And our hope, our goal is to return in November of this year. I don't want to go another year until we come back and talk to you again. So that would be our target. And again, our goal would be to utilize the revenue targets for our fiscal year ending 2021. So in other words, for the next fiscal year. And that target revenue number would come from staff in terms of what they're looking to hit, whether it's, you know, including some loan information and, you know, loan payback, and if there's any buffer that they want to add in there. So we would like to include those targets. So you would see some actual numbers that would end up being used for the next fiscal year. We've been talking all about water, but we want to bring back the same sort of numbers for wastewater. So you would see what the full picture would be for water and wastewater for next year. It also would be an opportunity for the public to come and hear what's happening and what the suggestions are, and also to get some public input. And we would hope at that point that council would be able to make some sort of decision in terms of going forward. You know, our goal here is to be able to use whatever the decision is, whether it be scenario 5 or sticking with what we currently have, to go into the planning for the next budget cycle. So that's kind of our forward plan. And then, you know, after a decision is made, there's some work that has to happen as well. You know, we have to have a plan to communicate with all the customers. There'll need to be an ordinance update that includes all the information in terms of how billing is done. The ordinance that we have now is pretty slim in terms of what's in there. So we'd want to have the ordinance capture the rationale and the entire approach that we're taking. And there are a couple other things that aren't addressed specifically in ordinances now, how irrigation accounts are handled, how fire suppression accounts are handled. We'd like to take the opportunity when we're making an update to the ordinance to make sure that we address all of the situations that right now really aren't addressed explicitly in the ordinance. And then, of course, once the ordinance is developed, it would come back for official approval by the council. And again, the goal would be to get that in before the budget cycle starts for the next fiscal year. So when the whole budget thing happens and the resolutions happen, the plan is in place and the ordinance is set and approved. That's kind of what we're looking for, if that makes sense.
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Carolyn,
Yeah. And
for all your hard work.
thank you. I, of course, want to recognize the rest of the folks on the Public Works Committee. You know, like I said, we've been talking about it for so long that we're all kind of worn out. And so we're looking forward to having some closure on this and being able to move forward. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Carol. Good job. Okay, that concludes our discussion items. Status reports, communications from counselors. Anybody have anything?
I had mine, just one.
Yes, we have concern with the minutes. So, I guess what could happen, since we've already passed the minutes, we could make an amendment motion.
It's just a tweak.
If it's just a tweak, then you can kind of work out Colleen what? Or is it a actual, well, tell us what it is. Might want to
Okay,
start
it
with
has to do with the fire code. It's ordinance 2 on the August 6th, page 3 of 9. And it talks about short-term rental code should be in alignment with the state building code. It's actually the Oregon State Fire Code.
for the title of what the code is. Okay.
Yes. And
That's kind of
at the bottom, it says, allow a maximum of 10 people unless there is a sprinkler. It should be an indoor sprinkler system. Yeah.
Okay, I don't think those are dramatic changes that
No, they're
anybody's
not.
mentioned that their voice was misrepresented. Okay? Just a couple things. When Nadia spoke earlier about supporting the, or not supporting, or putting a preference to not cut down trees down in Arcadia Beach area, does anybody have any problems with a letter from the city?
I do not.
Just see a letter.
Okay. I will contact Nadia and see if we can work up something that we can send a letter of support to her side of the view on that. The other thing I wanted to mention is the potluck on the 23rd. So everybody out there is going to bring a friend, right? Okay. Anybody else?
I kind of liked Nadia's idea of getting the no smoking signs in the parks. Do we have a prohibition against that? I know that it came up.
There's only two places in the city ordinance where tobacco is mentioned, and that's in the skate park and on the basketball courts. There's nothing that prohibits smoking in the city parks.
Yeah, I remember that there was a campaign at one time to do that, and it went around to various city councils, but I don't remember the Cannon Beach Council approving it. So that's what I was kind of curious. But if we, at least if we have it at the skate park and the basketball courts, we should have a sign, a bigger sign maybe than what apparently we have now.
Apparently the playground is not included. Okay.
Yeah. I was also curious if Lolly has got any of her little boxes anywhere on the parks. I know garbage cans do.
I think she is. I think she is, yeah.
Okay,
I'm not sure about.
just check on that. Okay, Bruce?
Yes, sir. I'd asked for some time on good of the order. We will be starting the public hearings for Fordune on September 12th. And thought it would be good if you would take some time to set parameters for speakers, how long the average speaker gets. Are you going to allow additional time for people that are representing a group? There's a list of questions that I'd forwarded. If you want, I can just go down and you can nod your heads yes or no. The first one is more or less a suggestion. Let you sign in cards to submit to speak. That way we can just put them in front of the mayor as opposed to trying to have people sign on multiple sheets or something. And then we've got the record. So just have cards based on when your card comes up is when you would speak. So if you're okay with that one. How long would each citizen of the public, or each citizen be allowed to speak?
It's usually 3 minutes, isn't it?
I'm happy with 3 minutes.
Right? And just a suggestion that instead of making it hard and fast, that the mayor, as the one that's running the proceedings, has some discretion on how that gets judged.
Say that again.
Well, so that it be, well, like if somebody, are we going to use a hook to pull somebody out of 3 minutes? Or if somebody says, I just need another minute, does the mayor have the discretion, or is it going to be a hard 3 minutes? Because that always comes up. I'm fine either way.
I don't have any troubles with a little bit of leeway in there, just because somebody might want to complete a sentence or something like that.
Okay.
It does become a challenge, because then if I gave Jim 30 seconds more, that's a bit of an issue. I'm trying to think of how to control it better.
Is there some kind of indication we could use to know when people are, for people to know when they're,
If I had a 10-second card or something like that, I could put that up. That's how they do it.
We could probably there's timers, clocks that can do like 3 minutes. And somebody just hits the 3 minute thing and everybody gets to see it.
These guys have good clocks on them.
Yeah, but just something that the speaker can see too.
yeah.
Most of these actually have that in the council chambers, the countdown clock for each speaker.
Okay.
Cool.
All right, let us look into countdown clocks.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, the next one is organizations such as Friends of the Dunes, Chamber of Commerce, Breakers Point, the Presidential Street Association. Will there be arrangements for them to have a representative that gets a longer time? And if I can, it's also going to go to the next question. Will citizens be allowed to cede their time or unused portion of the time to someone else?
No.
Okay? So then if there's somebody that is kind of speaking for the group, and, I think that somebody should be allowed to speak longer if they're speaking for a group. I just don't know how you define a group, because I can be a group of one and want 20 minutes. So that's the hard part of that. But I don't know if how you do that. Like if you say that the Friends of the Dunes will have one person to be able to speak. Suppose I think I should be that person, and Nancy was the one that was delegated. It just gets dicey. So I thank you for the decision on no ceding their unused or their time. Do we want to allow groups for a longer time for somebody to make a single presentation?
Somehow we have to recognize what a group is. So if a group, somebody that has a name, if they submit before the meeting to staff somehow, who will be the representative, and then a list of names of who they represent?
I don't think we'll have any trouble with Friends of the Dunes, Breakers Point, probably the Chamber, and them giving us that information. Conversations we had is that they would like, if it's going to be a single person, like 15 minutes. They're not looking for a half hour, an hour. But maybe we just identify those, and then if anybody wants to identify themselves as a group, they...
Well, someone like Orca, I imagine, might come, and if they do, I think they should be included in that group. Coast Watch is another organized group that I think should be.
Okay, so the night of the meeting, somebody can identify themselves as a group, and then they would get the 15 minutes?
I still think they need to I understand where you're coming from, that if it's a known name, Orca or somebody like that, but I would like to have at least some representation of who they represent. So if they give
They
us,
have that.
you know, yeah, if they can hand over a list of names of people they represent. So if I called somebody on that list and said, do you know this guy? Yeah, okay. I want some sort of verification on it, and that would have to come in ahead of time, so that means we need to get the word out.
Yeah, And I don't know if we'll be able to reach everybody on
Yeah.
that, so.
But I think that also, again, when we see, you know, if it's ECAP, if they show up and they want to talk about it, kind of know who those folks are, so I'm okay with, you know,
What if you were to set, for the ones that we know, 15 minutes, but if somebody else comes in and says, I'm representing work or whoever, that they get 7 minutes or something, so it's a lesser time?
yeah, we could do that.
Because I'm not sure if somebody is just, is representing, say, an environmental group. Well, again, I mean, that's totally your
So-
call.
What about if everybody, let's say, Friends of the
Yeah.
anyone's organization, give them whatever, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 minutes, and make their spiel. And then a member of that also wants to talk, representing themselves.
They can talk for 3 minutes.
Well, then how about just anybody talk for 3 minutes? And then you're gonna get 20 people from one of these organizations, each taking their 3 minutes. Or you're gonna say, well, you're a member of a group, so you can't speak. It gets really awkward. Anything less than just everybody gets 3 minutes.
I think that you're stuck with everybody getting 3 minutes. It's a public hearing, very hard to set criteria to say that you can talk, but you can't talk.
Yeah.
Or she's spoken, so you can't, because you have the same idea. I think you.
But Mike's saying that also the representatives only get 3 minutes.
No, I'm saying just what he said. So I'm the representative. Represent this group. I make my 3-minute speech, but somebody else that is part of my group, they can stand up and make
That's
their
just how it is. I don't think you can stop Breaker's
No, I
Point
think-
from having as many unit owners as wants to speak.
Yeah.
I think that would be a very difficult thing to do.
So my concern is if we are going to give some groups or some people additional time, that we not have arbitrary and capricious requirements for that. We can run into some First Amendment issues that, you know, you're allowing one group 15 minutes, but you're not allowing another group 15 minutes. Well, what's that based on? You know, and if we had had some, you know, neutral criteria submitted ahead of time, we could definitely do that. If you're registered as a nonprofit or you can verify that you have at least 10 members, those are great. You could use those neutral criteria. But my concern would be somebody would show up and be like, well, I'm a group of 2. You didn't establish any standards. Why aren't you letting me speak? So my 2 cents would be just the flat 3 minutes.
For everybody, for all groups and individuals as well.
Otherwise, I can stand up and say, well, that group didn't speak for me, even though I'm a member of that group. I want to have my own say. So 3 minutes eliminates a lot of those issues. For everybody.
Okay. Next one is, if I've spoken, can I put in another card and get up again? Or can I come to the next meeting and speak again?
I've wondered about that. Come to every meeting.
Right. And I'm sorry to be,
Sometimes it has to be a new topic.
and this is pretty much a one topic or subject.
Yeah, but there's several
There are a
aspects
lot
of it.
of,
A lot of aspects.
yeah,
For sure.
aspects of it.
Yeah, okay. If that's the position, and I understand it, then we just let people, maybe say you get to speak once a night or something.
I would definitely say once a night.
Yeah. Okay.
But considering the fact that we've got the meetings pretty tightly bunched, you know, we'll be able to remember if Jan speaks 3 times. So we can give her the snake eye, I guess. I don't know.
I can't see why they couldn't speak a second night or a third night. I
I
mean,
don't either.
Yeah.
why not? I mean,
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have.
They might want, they might hear something the first night and want to talk about it the second night, so.
Okay?
Another idea about the groups would be to say that we have the first hour is only for group speakers. To represent from the group's point of view, just so we don't have the group guys kind of mishing in between all the individuals.
Are you saying the first hour of the first meeting or the first hour of each meeting?
First hour of the first meeting. I don't know, that might not be possible because you got scheduling that somebody might not be able to make. But at least the first, just so you get a point of view from the professional lawyer-y kind of guy right up front, rather than waiting for him to get a sense of where the whole meeting is going and adjusting to it. I don't know, I don't know where I was going with that.
So maybe at each hearing, we could ask, are there any groups that haven't been heard before
That'll work.
Able to speak tonight, and then have them at the beginning of the meetings, if they haven't spoken before, the groups.
And they still get 3 minutes?
Yes, so.
Yeah, if I was a member of the group, and we have 3 minutes, and well, okay, you address this topic,
Sure.
I'll address this topic, you address that topic, and you're gonna get your 15 minutes.
Okay. So we do want to ask if there's anybody representing a group in the first, and this would be the mayor doing this.
I'll do that initially,
Okay,
yeah.
Initially, so that would happen. If people, we're asking that people don't speak twice in the night, but they can come back and speak at another public hearing. Everybody's tied to 3 minutes. Jeff, was there any other questions other than the written record? I'll get to that one. Okay,
I have one concept. For those folks who don't like to speak in front of people, if they want to pass a question up, I have no problem with asking the question.
but see, the public hearing is not for people to ask you questions.
I know.
Is to take testimony. And that was where I'm sorry, you can make anything that you want, but usually the public hearing is
Yeah.
for them to say, this is what I think. We are also going to tell people that you can provide written comments.
That
Yes.
works. That's the same thing.
Right. Now, what we're looking to is October 7th to be the last public hearing, and that you would be able to go into deliberations. So what we're suggesting is that there's a time frame, maybe October 1st or something, when the written comments are done, so that you're able to read those comments before you start your deliberations. But if somebody, if it goes up until that night and somebody submits something, it's kind of awkward for you to go forward with your discussion without having read those comments. So what we're saying is, let's back it up to a time. This is the last time that we'll accept written comments. You'll have an opportunity to read those before the 7th, and then you can start your deliberations on the 7th. Is that acceptable?
It's acceptable to me. I feel a little bad that people aren't allowed to, but it also precludes somebody dumping a, 30-page memorandum on us the night of the 7th.
Right.
Which I would really like to avoid.
Right, and that's how we're trying to avoid.
Okay.
People will have from now until, maybe, and I don't know what the date would be, October 1st or something. Usually we try to get to you a week in advance. So there would be, 2 or 3 weeks that people would be able to go ahead and provide written comments.
We should announce that
Oh, sure.
at each meeting, at each hearing.
Yes, and we'll, try to do something with more, yes, but we'll put that out, but there will be an end time for that. Now, just one question, semi-related. We have it scheduled that the public hearing will end on the 7th. If there's still time, you have the ability, we'll set it up that you can have you start your deliberations. You have a workshop the next night. Do you want us to put consideration or allow you to have deliberations the next evening if you want? It would just be a matter of us putting it on the workshop agenda. You can always say no, but there is a meeting the next night. So would you like us to put it on the agenda in case you want to talk about it?
Probably should.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Sorry. The big calendar. That's all I have. Thank you very much for your cooperation.
Anybody else for good of the order? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.